the Perkin-Elmer AmpFlip D1S80 kit manual, are you not?
The product insert?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
And that talks about one of the problems of this system being, one of the interpretation problems, that you may lose larger bands with a degraded sample, does it not?
Sustained.
Let me show you, well, let me ask you, are you aware, let me show you. Are you familiar with that kit insert?
Yes, I am.
And is that what you have in your hands?
And yes, it is.
And do you rely on that in performing the test that you perform?
Yes, this was, third amplification conditions are used in our laboratory for our analysis.
Please look at page 18, section 8.3.1. You ever read that section before?
Yes, I have.
Would you agree that that says that you may lose larger bands if a sample is degraded?
Yeah, what it states is that when you have a single banded pattern, that your results should be interpreted with caution. The company has also done some follow-up research in which they've published a paper in May of 19...
I object. This is not responsive.
That would, all right, proceed.
And wouldn't you agree that the kit insert also tells you that some alleles don't align up with the ladder? I'm referring to 8.3.2, right below that.
Yes, that's true.
And does that indicate that there are a couple of reasons why that might happen as well? And that is,
Hold on.
are you familiar with the section that I'm talking about, 8.3.2?
Yes.
And that gives several reasons why you might have bands that don't line up the way they're supposed to with the ladder, correct?
Yes, and these are subtle shifts that they're referring to in this section.
Now the kit also is warranted for amplification of 2.5 nanograms of DNA or more, correct?
Yes, they state in here that they guarantee results with 2.5 nanograms of DNA.
And many of the tests that you ran in this case were on amounts far less than that, correct? Or I should say components of mixtures.
Yes, we amplified some samples down to 1 nanogram.
Now the D1S80 system is less informative than the RFLP system because it has fewer alleles. Would you agree with that?
Well, we're looking at one region on the D1S80 system, whereas with RFLP we're looking at various regions as Dr. Cotton and Mr. Sims discussed.
Now let me break it down then. You're only looking at one location on the genome.
Correct.
One place in the DNA. With RFLP, with a single probe, you're also looking at one location in the DNA, correct?
Correct.
And with RFLP, however, you can have many different alleles, 60, 70, 80 different alleles for a given probe, can you not?
Sure, yes, you can.
And in the D1S80 system, you have a fewer number of possible alleles, correct?
Correct.
So there's less variation among people in the D1S80 system than in the RFLP system because there's fewer possible alleles that you could find in people, correct?
Yes, by comparing D1S80 to RFLP profiles.
Now, the 24 allele is extremely common, is it not?
Yes, the 24 allele is one of the more common alleles.
In fact, over a third of the Caucasian population will have that, correct? Approximately?
Yes, I believe approximately 30% will have within their genotype a 24 or an 18 allele.
And that makes this system, in this particular case where both Mr. Simpson and Mr. Goldman have 24 alleles, makes it less informative than if they had more rare alleles, correct?
Well, with Mr. Goldman, he's a 24 homozygote. With Mr. Simpson, you need to look at the other allele that goes along with that 24 allele.
My question is, when you have a 24 allele, it's a less informative system than if you have a more rare allele, correct? Because you can't narrow it down as far in terms of the potential contributors.
Correct. If you had two rare alleles, then
It'd be better.
more informative. Right.
And the 18 allele, Nicole Brown-Simpson is an 18-18. That is also a very common allele, is it not?
Correct. By very common, as I just stated a few sentences back, that between the 18 and the 24 alleles, you'll see this in one or that allele in approximately 60% of the population, either the 18 or the 24. But then you also look at the other allele that goes with the individual.
In fact, well, if we do that with 18-18, that's actually a fairly common genotype, is it not? 6% of the population has it, Caucasian population?
Oh, I'd have to refer to my notes for the exact
Why don't you do that?
frequency. Yes, and 1818 occurs in approximately 6% of the Caucasian population.
So of 100 people, you would expect there to be 6 people that would have that combination, Caucasians.
Approximately 6 out of 100.
Okay. And that, because that allele is involved, that's much less informative than if you had a rarer genotype.
Yes, if you had a rarer one, then you'd have less occurrence in the population.
And the fact that Mr. Goldman shares an allele with Mr. Simpson makes it even less informative because there may be some difficulty in assessing who's responsible for the 24 allele. Would you agree with that?
You're talking about mixtures now?
Yes.
And would it be, I'm sorry, could you restate that?
Because there's an allele in common, that makes it more difficult for you to separate components of a mixture because there's one allele that 2 people have in common. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
Let me ask you to refer to page 91 of your notes. You have that in front of
I'm
you?
afraid I'm going to lose all of them.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, do you and Mr. Sims and the other people in your lab use the same standards to decide whether something is a hint versus a trace versus a C- versus a C?
As it pertains to D1S80?
Yes.
Yes, there's no standard technology as to a hint trace for D1S80. So what happens is when someone's second reading a gel, they call it, and if they call it something different than the first analyst, then you document it in your notes as to what they, if they aren't calling it a hint, then you write what they're actually calling it.
But the term hint and trace mean different things. Correct?
Yes, a hint would be less than a trace.
Okay. And everybody in your lab conforms to that standard?
Typically, yes.
Is that a standard that's set out anywhere in any of the manuals?
No, it's not.
And would you agree that that has a certain subjective element to it? One examiner might call something a hint, another person might call the same thing a trace.
Jackson calls the
Overrule.
It's possible. When you get down to those lower levels, a hint would be, a hint uniformly throughout the laboratory by DNA casework analyst is something that there's a hint there. There's an indication that something's there, but you can't be confident that it's actually a band. A trace, then uniformly through the lab, is there is a band there. It's a very, very weak band.
Now, you, on page 91 of your notes, that's a run where you were looking at what types of samples? It's your DNA 59.
Those are 4 stains from Mr. Goldman's genes.
Now, would you agree that in your lane number 12 on your work notes, you described that as a 24, with a hint of an 18?
Correct.
And the second reader scored it the same way, correct?
Yes, and also the supervisor who reviewed it scored it the same also.
What did you report that as in your report? And I ask you to refer to your report of April 6, 1995, page 8 of 11.
That was reported out as a 24 homozygote with a possible trace 18 allele.
What's the difference between a possible trace and a hint?
Well, there's a difference between actually writing your observations on your worksheet and doing your interpretation. Your worksheet's what you actually observed, and then one needs to think about how they're going to word these reports. And I could have written in the report a hint of an 18 allele, but a possible trace, the words sound more effective than a hint of an 18 allele. So the 3 of us that wrote this report, Mr. Sims, Mr. Myers, and myself, discussed it and tried to come up with the correct wording that would adequately describe what we saw. And what we came up with was possible trace. And that's not saying that there's a trace of an 18, that's saying there's possibly a band there, but we aren't confident calling it.
So when you say you want to do it more effectively, in other words, to put forward the prosecution's case?
No, not at all. To reflect what the evidence, is. Doesn't matter if it helps the prosecution or the defense. We're just reporting the science.
What changed between your reading of the actual film and when you wrote the report to cause you to change the way that was described?
Sustain. Rephrase the question.
Did something change in terms of your analysis of this particular test result? Did you read it again, or something change?
No, it's to write a hint in a report, it just doesn't, what does a hint mean in a report? In the laboratory, I know what a hint means, and I'm able to hopefully tell you what a hint means. But in a report, for someone just to pick this report up and be able to read it, whether it's the prosecution or the defense, we need to convey what we're trying to get across to them. And by saying a possible trace, that conveys that we're not confident that a band exists there. And to just say a hint of an 18 is, to me, it doesn't state it as effectively as saying a possible trace.
Now, unlike RFLP technology, you don't use any kind of computer aids to determine whether there's a band there and whether it's a hint or a trace or a possible trace, do you?
No, that's one of the great things about this system. We get to use the basics.
You just look at it and you say, looks like a trace to me or looks like a hint to this guy, right?
No, it's all based on one's experience also.
And every analyst that looks at these things always comes up with the same terminology, hint, trace, possible trace?
Well,
Overrule.
well, I can't, outside of our laboratory, I'm not quite sure if people would put the same words to these. in our laboratory, it's pretty well defined. And as you can see on this particular one, 3 different individuals read it, and they all came up with the same word, hint at 18.
Have you ever done any studies where you have looked at different quantities of DNA in a mixture, for instance, to see what happens when you start reducing the quantity to determine at what point a band becomes an artifact?
Yes, I've done studies to demonstrate at which level or at what level you start losing a minor component.
And have you published any studies that show the differences in intensity of the bands between a hint and a trace and a C minus?
No, I have not.
And there's no scale that you use to do this, is there?
No, it's a scale that's made in our laboratory.
I'm sorry?
It's made in our laboratory, and it's just a scale of progression, as I described earlier.
Now, as a sample degrades, have you done any testing to determine what happens when a sample is degrading, in terms of how it shows up, whether it shows up as a band or an artifact?
Yes, I did some temperature studies in the laboratory to see what happened when various samples were subjected to various temperatures for differing amounts of time.
It's not like a light switch, is it, where it's either there or it isn't there. There are gradations of band intensities, are there not?
That's true, yes.
And you must use your subjective judgment to decide whether something is really a band as opposed to an artifact, correct?
Well, when one gets to the lower level where you're not sure if it is a band, then yes, that's correct.
Now, when you read these things, did you know what genotypes the 2 victims and Mr. Simpson had?
Sustained.
All the evidence samples that you read, when you did that, did you know the genotypes of Mr. Simpson and the 2 victims?
Yes, I did.
So you knew what results you expected to get, at least as to some of the contributors, correct?
I didn't know what I expected to get, no.
You knew what alleles were common to this case, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And you knew these were evidence samples from this case, did you not?
Yes, I did.
You didn't have any kind of expectation in your mind that perhaps these evidence samples would produce these bands?
Well, no, because that's part of testing the evidence, is to see who can be excluded and who can't be excluded.
You know, are you familiar with the term examiner bias?
Yes, I've heard that.
What does that mean?
You know, I believe I've only heard it in the context of, let me back up. Examiner bias, I think, would be an individual having some bias on their examination.
Have you ever heard it used in the context of someone who knows the results they're supposed to get, subconsciously getting the results that they think they're supposed to get? Not through any trickery or lying or anything, but just you see what you think you're going to see.
So someone could produce bands on the gel? Is that what you're stating?
No, someone might interpret one thing as an artifact or as a faint band, depending on what they expect to see.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that happening, no.
You're not aware of any studies that talk about that particular phenomenon?
I haven't read any studies that address that, no.
Now, you indicated that the range of size of the fragments in the D1S80 system was about 400 to 800 base pairs.
Roughly, yes.
And the size of the fragments in the DQ alpha system are less than 400 base pairs, correct? It's about 240?
Correct, around 242.
So would you agree that in a degrading sample, you would expect the D1S80 bands to disappear before the DQ alpha allele from a particular piece of DNA?
Yes, that's possible.
So that if you had a mixed sample, let's say in the DQ alpha system, you see evidence of a mixture, but you don't see any extra alleles in the D1S80 system, that might be explained by the fact that the sample is degraded.
Yes, and one needs to also look at their yield gel. to determine if degradation was occurring on that, if it's possible.
Well, you're aware that the Bundy drops in this case were severely degraded, or are you aware of that?
Yes, I believe some of the samples were degraded.
Okay. And are you aware of the DQ alpha testing results on the steering wheel sample? That's item 29.
Yes, I am.
You're aware that there was a 4 allele, which is inconsistent with a genotype of any of the 3 people in this case.
Yes, there was a weaker 4 allele detected on the steering wheel sample.
And the reason it was inconsistent because there was no 1.3 to go along with that, which would have been consistent with Ronald Goldman.
Right. This was a very low-level amplification, or a low-level amplification.
You never tested the steering wheel, item number 29, with the D1S80 system, did you?
No, we didn't.
There was no effort made to try and find out what alleles might be present.
No, there wasn't enough DNA present to analyze it by the D1S80 system.
And how do you know that?
Because I remember discussing that issue with Gary Sims at the time that we were doing the analysis on those samples.
How much DNA was present?
I'll have to refer to Gary Sims' notes to tell you that.
Go ahead.
That item in your notes?
Yes, I have.
All right, can you give council the page reference?
It's on Gary Sims, page 40. This is another advantage to numbering pages, I guess.
What page are you referring
Gary Sims, 40.
Yes.
to? 36?
40.
Gary Sims, 40.
40.
Sorry.
Compare your notes with Ms. Montgomery's.
Yes, the quantity was approximately 0.9, was it not?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
0.9 what, nanogram?
Nanograms.
Ms. Montgomery? Nanograms?
Correct. 0.9 nanograms. Well, to be two significant digits, Gary wrote 0.86 nanograms.
And you've performed D1S80 tests on amounts less than that, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
So it wasn't a matter of there not being enough to test, was it?
No, it was a matter of there not being enough to test, due to the fact that this sample was first used for DQ alpha typing, and after using a portion of it for the DQ alpha typing, there wasn't enough sample left for D1S80 typing.
Could we have photo 95, please? And this will be, what are we up to?
This would be 1176. Mrs. Robertson, 1176? Yes. Fence, 1176.
Ms. Montgomery, could you look at the monitor and tell me if that appears to be a photograph of your run number 297?
Yes, actually, this analysis was done by Steve Myers at our laboratory.
And this is it has samples from Nicole Brown Simpson's dress, correct?
Yes, it does.
And the interpretation of this sample for samples G5 and G6 were an 18 allele stronger than a 24 allele.
You're referring to G3?
No, G5 and 6. Let me highlight those at the top. See G5 and G6?
Yes.
And you agree that that is an accurate picture of that film for that particular run?
Yes, it is. But once again, it's difficult to see the weaker components of this, and you'll actually have to look at the gels yourself.
All right, let me zoom in on G5 and 6. Would you agree that you cannot see any 24 allele, at least on this picture? What you see is the 18s, correct?
Correct.
There is nothing apparent here.
Well, this is all done with your computer. I mean, this isn't the actual sample, and so I don't know.
Would you look at your original sample and tell me if you agree that it is extremely faint?
It's a trace level of 24.
So this is a
But
trace, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but you can see it in here, and when you do see a copy of it later on, you'll be able to see that it's a trace amount of a 24 allele.
How much more is it than a hint?
Well, a hint, as I stated, is a hint is a possible. It's not a well-defined band. This trace, these are well-defined bands, and they're just very faint. And as far as why you can't see it on your monitor, I can't explain that. This is the actual copy.
I'm sorry, you have the actual one there?
Yes, I do.
Can we take a look at that?
Yes, but I would prefer that it not be put into evidence. Mr. Harmon has a copy of the blue copies.
Well, let me use the blue copy. Is that adequate?
Yes, Mr. Harmon has those copies, I believe.
Mrs. Robertson?
Did we get that number?
Yes, we did.
This is run 297.
In the corner there. All right.
this is Exhibit 275I. Everybody's on Elmo?
Go. Mrs. Robertson? Vote. Does it say AG 297 on that, Mr. Harris?
I believe it's just backwards or upside down.
Oh. Okay. Now, the area of interest Now, the area of interest that we're looking at are the two lanes over toward the right between the two ladders, correct?
Correct.
And you're saying that there is something more than a hint, which is a band, at 24.
Correct.
And can we put arrows in that area, Mr. Harris? And can we print that out, please? And I'd like to have that shown to the jury, please. Mark this print out.
All right, if you'll hand, do you want to hand the blue copy?
Maybe we could hand both at the same time.
All right. Takes about 3 minutes to print that out.
Could you make the print out 1176, please?
1177.
1177.
Make the printout 1176A.
Whatever your pleasure is.
Well, do you want to keep them together?
I think we just have one. That's fine.
All right.
That's good. 1176A. Let's hold off on that and show another picture. We can do a couple of them at the same time, if that's okay.
Proceed.
Could we have photo
I'm
number
sorry.
92, please?
Can I see a copy, that blue copy?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, Your Honor, could this be marked as the next in order,
1177.
1177? Now, Ms. Montgomery, the picture that we've put up now, 1177, contains the samples from Nicole Brown Simpson's fingernail scrapings, does it not?
Yes, it does.
I have an objection, Your Honor. May I approach on this, and it relates to what Ms. Montgomery said a moment ago.
All right, with the court report, please.
Now, Ms. Montgomery, this is one of the pictures that you looked at lunch to compare with your original film, correct?
Correct.
In this state's precedent, it's not one of the pictures, Your Honor.
Sustained for his question.
Well, this is a scanned image of the photograph that I have right here. Would you like to look at it?
Objection is irrelevant.
Would you like to look at the photograph that you looked at to assure yourself it's the same one?
Objection, that's irrelevant.
If you would like to hand that to me, sure. And yes, this is a photograph that you asked me to look at during lunchtime, and it appears to be a photograph taken by Dr. Ed Blake of one of my D1 SAD gels.
Okay, and does it appear substantially the same as the scanned photograph, the same photograph?
Objection, it's irrelevant whether it's substantially the same.
Sustained.
Does it appear does it appear to be the same on the screen as what you have in your hand?
Well, it has the same labeling and everything. I mean, this is a computer scan of the actual picture. So it appears similar. It's missing some of the side writing that's on these pictures.
Does it look any different at all, other than the side writing, other than the scanned image being a little smaller?
No, it looks very similar. I mean, it appears to be the same one scanned into a computer, I guess you're doing.
And you compared these photographs with your films during lunch, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And you indicated to me after lunch that these appeared to be accurate representations of your films, correct?
Correct. Some of the subtle, I mean, as I stated earlier, you need to actually see one of the blue copies to see some of the subtle, or some of the less intense bands, and I assume you'll be seeing those later.
Okay. And if any of these pictures that I show you, if something else is revealed on your copy, you tell me and we'll show that your copy as well, okay?
Okay.
Now, this is the run that you did with the samples from the fingernail scrapings, correct?
Correct.
And the fingernail scrapings appear in these lanes, 45B, 46B, and 45A1, correct?
Correct. Those are the scrapings and the clippings.
Okay. Which is which, just so it's clear?
45B, referring to my notes, 45B is the right scraping. 46B is the left scraping, and 45A-B1 is the right clipping.
Now let me back out of this, and I want to highlight those three lanes. Now, would you agree that there appears to be something going on below the 18 allele, correct?
You know, you're focusing in on these and zooming them up. You need to look at the actual gel. You can't,
Okay,
we don't
let's look
image
at-
our gels. We just do a hands-on
Okay.
look at the
Objection,
gel.
I'm a little distracted, and I'd ask the court to take that exhibit off the screen.
No, proceed.
Let's look at your original of this one, okay?
What was the gel number again? AG 293?
293.
Yes, this is my original. I have taped to the back a transparency with the labeling on it, but it's just a temporary removable item.
And would you agree that the area that I've blown up here conforms to what's on your original in terms of these band-like items below 18?
Well, no, this is like taking a very close-up photograph and trying to ask the person what they see in the whole photograph. You need to look at the big picture. You can't just focus in like that. It's
Well, look at the big picture.
inaccurate. By looking at this gel, there's just some silver precipitating in this region, and once again, you'll be able to see these. And there's just, you know, a little darkening down here. It's not a band by any means.
Would you agree that it looks like what we have up on the screen?
Well, this is a magnification. So,
Yes.
I mean, if I were to try to magnify this with my eyes, yes, but I think you need to look at the actual data and not magnify it up like that.
Well, we'll look at it. Does it look like there is something going on below the 18 allele at the position of the 17 allele under 46B?
What you can see is, if you look up at the gel, you could see a smearing from the first ladder all the way, I can't see it from here, but if you look at the first ladder and all the way over to pass the second to the last ladder, you'll see this dark smearing, and that's just a little silver being precipitated. That's just a smearing. It's during the staining process, and it's not by any means a band.
Would you agree that neither Nicole Brown Simpson, Ronald Goldman, nor O.J. Simpson have a 17 allele in the D1S80 system?
I agree with that, yes.
Now, this smearing that you're talking about that causes that activity in the 17 allele, is this something that went wrong with this test?
No.
Is this kind of smearing something that you typically see where you have, call them band-like appearances, appear on the gels?
Objection, this states the testimony.
Sustain. Rephrase the question.
Is this kind of smearing something that's typical for the D1S80 system?
It's not, well, no, I don't typically see something like this, and it's just, like I said, the silver is being precipitated and causing a nice flowing smear through that portion of the gel.
Did you run this again to see whether that activity at allele 17 disappeared?
Well, I don't see any activity at allele 17.
Did you run this again?
No, I did not.
Well, we have the picture itself. Here, and I would ask that this particular photograph, as well as the last one, be circulated to the jury.
All right, at this time? All right.
And
1177, 1176 with the printout.
the last one, we'll submit the blue copy as well.
All right. In 1177, Mr. Blasier, would you hand 1177 to juror number 7 and hand 1176 and the blue copy to juror number 1?
Now, the photograph that's up here, she's been referring to her original, which is different from the blue copy, and I'm wondering if the court would like me to circulate her original with my photograph, just so the jury can look at both.
May I see the original? Is this something a layperson can read by looking at it?
Oh, yes, these are. And you want to try to avoid touching the gel because you don't want to leave your oils on it.
Yep. All right, then we ought to do this in one set at a time.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, be careful how you handle the original gel, please.
You just handle them on the side because if you, just like photographs, if you touch the center, it kind of causes some residues.
So I will hand 275I and our printout, which is 1176A.
All right. Just looking at that, let me see, counsel, without the report. B.
Montgomery, this is the gel that shows 30, 31, 293, and 305. Do you have that in mind? Oh, maybe it isn't.
What AG number was that?
174.
Samples. 275B is reference samples, correct?
Now, do you see in the reference sample lane for Mr. Simpson, there appears to be 3 bands. Do you agree?
You know, I'll refer to my copy.
Okay. Could we zoom in on that a little bit more? Actually, there appears to be 4 bands, I think. Would you agree there appears to be actually 4 bands in that reference lane?
Yes, that's a shadow band effect.
That's not supposed to happen, is it?
Well, sometimes you see it in the center section of these acrylamide gels.
That's not supposed to happen, is it?
It's not supposed to happen. To optimize, you would prefer that it did not happen. It does happen on occasion, though.
What do you mean to optimize you would prefer it not happen? You don't want it to happen, do you?
No, you don't want it to happen.
Something went wrong with this particular gel that caused that to happen.
Objection, that's argumentative, and she didn't complete her
Sustained.
answer.
Did something go wrong with this particular gel that caused extra bands to show up?
Well, something didn't go wrong with the gel. Sometimes we see these shadow bands in the inside region of the gel, just in the center section. And as you can see, it is isolated to the center section of the gel. If it was an issue, the sample should be rerun. If there's a potential that these were mixed samples or something such as that, then you want to rerun these. It doesn't change any of the results of the analysis on this gel.
Is it one of the shortcomings of this system that sometimes happens that you get extra bands on there that are shadow bands?
Objection, that's argumentative.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Is that a characteristic of this system that, let me ask you this, how frequently does this happen?
It depends on who is doing the analysis. Different people. This is a very technique-y system. Some individuals tend to see it a little more often than others. In our laboratory, we've been able to minimize it, so we rarely see it anymore.
How often do you get it in tests that you conduct?
I'd say less than 5% of my gels would see them.
Now, would you also agree that the band on Mr. Simpson's reference sample at 24 is uneven in the sense that it's not even the same intensity across the band? Appears to be a kind of very bright on the left side of that band.
Well, there's the artifact, that little dot right on the end of the 24 band. But by looking at this copy also has that little dot, but it appears to be relatively equal intensity across the length of the well.
That little dot's not supposed to be there either, is it?
They're saying not supposed to be there. The dot is not part of the sample. No.
So it's not supposed to be there, correct?
One wouldn't want it to be there, no.
Could we have photo number 96? And I have an additional photo that will be 1178. I'm sorry? Yeah. We have photo 1174 and 1178 side by side, please. Does the photograph on the right appear to be your run 299?
No, it does not.
What run does that appear to be?
294.
Okay. And is it correct that the photo on the right has the samples 303 and 304 from the Bronco on them? I'm sorry, it's the one on the left. On the left of the screen is the run that has samples 303 and 304.
Correct.
And the one on the right is the run that has the samples for 30 and 31 from the Bronco and 293 from the carpeting in the Bronco.
That's correct.
Now, 303 and 304, you read those as containing a very weak 18 allele, I believe. Is that correct?
Once again, I'll look up my notes. Yes, for the two Bronco samples, DNA 52 and DNA 53, there was a weak 18 detected.
Now, I'm going to try and blow up that area. And the area that we've indicated is approximately in here. Is that correct?
I have the same objection that we lodged earlier. That's a distortion.
Or will.
And here? Have I circled the right areas?
Yes, as you can see, the 18 allele is, the 18 ladder allele is, I'm sorry, yes, that is correct.
Okay, and it's a very faint band, correct?
No, it's a weak band.
Weak band. And it's a weak band on your original as well, correct?
Yes, it's a weak band.
And that would indicate a very small amount of DNA being present, correct?
Well, it's relative to the amount that's present in the whole sample, yes.
Okay. And were you able to quantify the amount of DNA present that was contributed by the 18 allele?
No, what we do is a total quant to determine the total amount of DNA. We can't tell the difference between different alleles' contribution for the sample.
Would you agree that the band intensity of the 18 bands that I've circled is about the same as the 1 nanogram standard, or maybe less? Or what is your assessment of the relative intensities?
I'd say that's it.
Pull the microphone closer.
I'm sorry. There's approximately equal to the 1 nanogram, slightly less than the 1 nanogram for DNA 53.
And the intensity of that is far less than the 24 allele and the 25 allele, correct?
Well, yes, it is less than either the 24 or the 25 alleles.
Now, samples 30 and 31 are on the right picture, correct?
Yes, they are.
And you did not see any 18 alleles on those samples, correct?
For item 30 and 31, no, I did not see an 18 allele.
And I'm going to make a circle the area where you would expect to see that, specifically there. And would you agree that I've made little squiggles there about where the 18 band would be?
Yes, that proportion of that.
Okay.
Is correct.
And you indicated there was nothing there that you saw that could be a band.
That's correct.
Could we have that printed, please? Now, I want you to assume for a minute that 30 and 303 came from the same general area.
Objection, that's a proper hypothetical, misstates the testimony.
Sustained.
If you had a mixed stain that had alleles present in part of the stain that weren't present in another part of the stain, do you have that in mind?
So what you're saying is a blood stain where one person's bleeding here and one person's bleeding here and some of one person's diffusion into another?
No, let's just say you have a stain, a fairly relatively large stain, and you test one area of the stain and you find some alleles. You test another area of the stain and you find some additional alleles. You have that in mind?
Yes.
Would that be an indication, would one explanation be that those stains were put there at different times?
Objection, cause for speculation.
Sustained.
Proper inadequate foundation.
Sustained.
Would that be consistent with two different stains being put on that surface at different times?
I couldn't make a determination as to that, no.
Okay. Could we have 11, photo 90 back on? Now, you have no personal information about what happened between when sample 30 and 31 was collected and when samples 303 and 304 were collected, do you?
No, I don't.
Now, the appearance of the 18 allele on 303 and 304, the very faint band, would you agree that the children of O.J. Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson both would have an 18 allele?
No, that's incorrect.
Why is it incorrect?
You're saying they would, or?
They would have an 18 allele, both of
Oh,
them.
I'm sorry. You are correct. If the mother's an 18 homozygote, then the children would all have an 18 allele present.
And there's a strong likelihood that those children might also have a 24 and a 25, or a 25.
Correct.
And that's because you inherit these alleles from your parents.
Correct.
And if there were stains mixed in with a blood stain that, from the children, you might expect to see some of the children's alleles in the stain. Correct?
If you had individuals with the same type,
Yes.
yes, that's possible.
And you have no way of telling whether the 18 allele in samples 303 and 304 was put there or got into that sample at the same time as the 24 and 25 alleles, do you?
No, I don't.
You have no way of aging how old the sample is from looking at the gel, correct?
Well, some indication can be obtained by if a yield gel is done on a sample, you can obtain some information if degradation has occurred. But
Okay.
by looking at strictly the D1S80 results, no.
But you can't tell, you might be able to tell that there was degradation, but you can't tell how old the stain is, can you?
No.
Could we have, I have two more photos, Your Honor. One would be
1179 and 1180.
1179 and 1180. We have photo 97 and 98. Now, the photograph on the left, would you agree that that appears to be the gel with the samples from the glove, the Bundy glove, I'm sorry, the Rockingham glove? G11, 12, and 13.
Yes.
And the one on the right, which is photograph, which is Exhibit 1180, appears to be stains G1, 2, 3, 4, 9, and 10, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And would you agree that you interpreted the three stains, G10, 11, and 13, as having a weak 25 allele?
Once again, I'll refer to the report. It's a weaker 25 allele. It's not a weak 25 allele.
It's much less intensity than the other alleles on those lanes, correct?
Yes, it's less intense than the 24 allele.
And let me circle 11 and 13. Oops. Have I got those about right?
Do the second one again, because you encroach on the band itself.
So let me circle both of them. Okay? And the 25 band is here and here for those two samples, correct?
That's correct.
And the fact that it's so much less intense than the 24 band would indicate that if there was a contribution from a 24-25 genotype, that person's contribution is very, very small compared to other contributors.
Yes, the 24, 25, or if the 25 is, well, the 25 is the minor component, along with an 18 on those samples. And the 24, 24 is the major contribution. So the minor contribution would be less than the major contribution.
And the same is true over on the picture of the right of G10 with respect to the 25 allele, correct?
That's correct, but in that situation, there isn't an 18 allele present.
But you called a 25 that's much less intense than the 24, correct?
I called a major type and a minor type, or major type and a minor allele in that particular sample.
Can we print that, please? Save it and print it later? And could I have first slide? The three stains from the glove, G10, 11, and 13, were the only stains on the glove where you found genotypes in the D1S80 system consistent with Mr. Simpson, correct?
That's correct. Those are the three areas where a 25 allele was detected along with the 24 allele.
And this is 1173A. Could we have B, please? And the indication that you have on your paperwork is that those three stains all came from the wrist area of the Rockingham glove, correct?
That's correct.
And we have the next slide, please. You tested a number of different stains from the rest of the Bundy glove, the Rockingham glove, correct?
Correct.
And isn't it accurate that you were able to exclude Mr. Simpson as a contributor to every stain that you looked at on that glove other than G10, 11, and 13 in the wrist area?
Yes, there was no 25 allele detected on the other stains.
And there was when you received this glove, do you know whether it was turned inside out?
Gary Sims did all the examination of the evidence in this case, so I don't recall.
As a forensic specialist, if you got a glove as a piece of evidence and you wanted to turn it inside out, how do you do that? Do you have to handle the wrist area a lot to get it turned inside out?
Well, I think it's not just a forensic analyst, but how would an individual in general turn a glove inside out if it were out the opposite direction?
Do you agree it would involve considerable manipulation of the wrist area of the glove?
Yes, I would.
And that calls for speculation.
Sustain. It's vague.
Now, this would be an appropriate time to break.
Finish.
Do you have any way of quantifying the amount of DNA attributable to the 25 allele in G10, 11, and 13?
No.
Do you have any way of placing an upper limit on it?
Yes, I could, by looking at the relative intensity of the 25 compared to the major contributor of a 24 homozygote, I could tell you the extremes that it can be. And for the sensitivity of our system, what we find is at beyond 1 to 20, you can't see the minor component. You typically cannot see the minor contribution in a sample.
But you have no way of quantifying how much DNA was present that caused the 25 allele to appear.
The exact amount, no.
And it could be a very small amount.
That should cause for speculation.
It's vague. Sustain.
Could be below 1 nanogram, couldn't it?
Of total DNA or of DNA on the
DNA on the gel.
gel? Well, in this case, what I could do is compare the 1 nanogram standard, the 25 allele, to the 1 nanogram standard. And would you like me to do that?
Yes.
That 25 allele is approximately equal intensity to the 1 nanogram control that's on the gel.
And I'm sorry, which sample were you looking at?
I'm looking at G11 and also G13.
How about G10?
G10 is also approximately equal to the 1 nanogram standard.
It's a much smaller amount compared to the other alleles on the gels, correct?
Yes, the other band in those samples looks a little greater than the 4 nanogram standard.
And you have no way of telling from this test whether or not that 25 allele got on that glove at the same time as the other alleles on the glove, do you?
No, I don't.
That's all I have.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the afternoon. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss this case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't allow anybody to communicate with you. Don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. As far as the jury is concerned, we'll stand in recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And Ms. Montgomery, you're ordered to come back tomorrow morning, 8:45. All right? Stand in recess. Thank you, counsel.